Although they can be useful for getting shallow depth of field effects in bright lighting, for landscapes, plain ND filters are normally used for getting longer shutter speeds. This allows you to blur movement in the subject, such as water, clouds, or even foliage. Now I know that blurred water in landscapes isn't to everyone's taste, but it can add a sense of time and movement to your landscape shots. ND filters are available in both round and square versions. Now both types work equally well, so choosing between them comes down to whether you want to use it on its own, in which case the screw-in filters are fine, or if you already own a filter system, then the square filters are a better option. Now standard plain ND filters also come in a range of strengths. The weaker versions, which usually reduce the light by either 1, 2 or 3 stops, will allow you to use slightly longer shutter speeds than without the filter. But if you want to use extremely long shutter speeds, even in bright daylight, you'll need to use one of the almost opaque versions that reduce the exposure by up to 10 stops. These filters can almost turn day into night, allowing you to use exposure times of 30 seconds or even longer in bright sunshine. Using the weaker ND filters is really simple, as they're clear enough to still be able to frame and focus once they're in place. But the strong ND filters are so dark that once it's on the lens, you can't see through the viewfinder. So when using this type of filter, you need to set the framing, focus and even the exposure before you fit the filter in place. So once you've fixed the camera to your tripod, you need to switch to manual focus and exposure, and then focus on your subject. And finally, set the exposure. In many situations, you'll find that you won't be able to measure the exposure accurately with the filter on. So you should first work out the exposure without the filter, and then adjust the shutter speed to compensate for the light reduction of the filter. So, for example, if the correct exposure without the filter is 1/30th of a second at f8, if you fit a 10-stop ND filter, you'll need a shutter speed of 30 seconds, while the exposure for a 9-stop filter would be 15 seconds. But before you take your final shot, it's worth covering the eyepiece of your camera to prevent light leaking in and spoiling your images. Now some cameras have a built-in viewfinder blind, but on most models you'll have to remove the rubber eyepiece and fit a plastic cover that normally comes supplied with the camera. So these filters are perfect for blurring slow-moving subjects like clouds, or completely smoothing out the sea, particularly if you want to get this effect on bright sunny days.